The rain beat against the tin roof, drumming like impatient fingers. Rachel sat on the edge of her narrow bed, her knees drawn up to her chest, and stared at the ceiling. A patch of plaster had peeled away, revealing old, water-stained wood. She traced the cracks with her eyes the way one might read a map, as if the lines could lead her out of this life. The room smelled of damp clothes and soap powder. Her books were stacked neatly in one corner, their spines bent from overuse. The only bright thing in the room was a faded calendar on the wall, still stuck on last month. She hadn't had the heart to tear it away. What did dates matter when every day felt like the same struggle? Her landlord's voice still thundered in her ears, cutting through the fragile quiet. 2 days, Rachel. 2 days, or I'll throw your things into the street. The words replayed in her mind, sharper than any knife. She had no money. The cafeteria job barely covered her food. The cleaning work at the lawyer's office paid late, if at all. Her tuition was overdue, and if the rent was not paid by Friday, she would be sleeping on the roadside. Her throat tightened. She pressed her palms against her face, as if hiding from the reality pressing in on her. From the window, Clara's voice came, light and unbothered. "Stop sulking, Ratch. Crying won't make the landlord change his mind." Rachel dropped her hands and looked at her friend. Clara was leaning casually against the window frame, chewing gum with a kind of careless rhythm, her painted nails tapping the sill. She looked fresh and confident, a sharp contrast to Rachel's weary frame. "You think I don't know that?" Rachel's voice cracked despite her effort to sound firm. Clara shrugged, popping her gum. "Then do something about it. You can't keep killing yourself with these useless jobs, running from one shift to another, collapsing on this bed and still coming up short. How long do you think you can keep this up?" Rachel's fingers twisted together. "What choice do I have, Clara? Nursing school won't wait for me. If I stop, it all ends." For a long moment, Clara said nothing. Then she stepped forward, her eyes narrowing in thought. "There's a man," she said, almost casually. "Rich, generous, likes company. One night with him and you'll clear your rent for 6 months, maybe even more." Rachel froze. The words dropped into the silence like stones. "Clara, no, don't say that." Her friend arched a brow. "Why not? You're broke, Rachel, desperate. Don't pretend you're too holy for this. People survive however they can. You want to sleep on the street instead." Rachel shook her head quickly. "I'm not like that, I can't." "You can." Clara's tone was sharp, almost cutting. "You just don't want to admit you're desperate. You think all those other girls in this neighborhood are better off because they work harder. No, darling, they're smart. They know how to use what they have. You," she gestured at Rachel's thin frame, her soft features, "you could be the one turning men's heads. You just refuse." Rachel's face burned. "I want to make it with my own hands, Clara, not by." "Not by what?" Clara snapped. "Not by being like everyone else. You're not special, Rachel. You're hungry, you're broke. And if you don't do something, you'll be out on the street before the week ends." Rachel's lips trembled. She wanted to argue, to shout, to insist she would find another way. But the truth hung heavy in the room. She had tried everything. She had scrubbed floors until her back ached, washed dishes until her fingers pruned, sold her blood once at a clinic for a few bills. Nothing was enough. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the rain on the roof. Rachel's heart pounded as the walls of her pride closed in. Her dignity screamed, but desperation whispered louder. Finally, her voice came out small, almost unrecognizable. "Where do I find him?" Clara's lips curved into a satisfied smile. "I knew you'd see sense." She walked toward the door, her heels clicking on the worn cement floor. "Don't worry, Ratch. I'll arrange everything. Tomorrow night you'll meet him." When the door shut behind her, Rachel collapsed onto the bed. The tears she had held back now flowed freely, soaking the pillow. She hated herself for agreeing. She hated Clara for pushing. She hated the world for cornering her like this. She turned her face to the wall and whispered to the silence, "God, forgive me." The hotel room smelled faintly of whiskey and fresh linen. The curtains were drawn tight against the city lights, casting the room in a half-shadow that made everything look uncertain. Rachel stood near the door, her hands gripping the strap of her worn purse as though it were her only anchor. Her heart thumped so loudly, she was sure the man across the room could hear it. Henry. He was not what she had imagined. Clara had described him as handsome and wealthy, with the kind of arrogance that came with too much money. Yet the man sitting casually on the leather couch seemed different. His tailored shirt was open at the collar, his tie resting loosely on the armrest. His hair was neatly combed but not stiff, and his eyes, dark, watchful, studied her not with hunger but with curiosity. Rachel swallowed hard. She had never been in such a place before, never alone with a stranger in a room meant for what Clara had suggested. Henry's gaze lingered, steady but not unkind. He poured himself a drink from the small bar and leaned back. "You look uncomfortable," he said. His voice was deep, controlled, carrying a hint of amusement. Rachel forced a smile, her lips trembling. "I'm fine." He arched a brow, clearly unconvinced. He poured a second glass and set it on the table in front of her. "Here might help." She walked forward slowly, her legs stiff, and took the glass. The amber liquid caught the light, glowing rich and dangerous. She lifted it to her lips, but only pretended to sip. Henry chuckled quietly. "You don't drink, do you?" She lowered the glass, embarrassed. "Not really." His eyes softened, as though he had expected a different kind of woman to walk through that door. The kind who would gulp the drink and throw herself at him without hesitation. Instead, here stood a girl in a borrowed dress, her eyes darting nervously, her dignity fighting with her desperation. "You don't do this often, do you?" he asked, tilting his head. Rachel's voice came out barely above a whisper. "Never." For a moment, silence filled the room, heavy but not suffocating. Henry studied her more closely. There was something raw about her honesty, something almost painful in the way she held herself upright even while trembling inside. Instead of reaching for her, he found himself asking questions he never bothered with. "What's your name?" "Rachel," she said softly. "And what do you do, Rachel?" Her eyes flickered with pride despite her shame. "I'm a student, nursing school." That startled him. Nursing. "Yes, I'll be a nurse one day." There was conviction in her tone, even as her voice shook. Henry leaned forward, interested despite himself. Most of the women he knew spoke only of parties, trips, and expensive gifts. Here was someone talking about saving lives. For the next hour they talked. He asked, she answered. Slowly, her shoulders relaxed and her hands stopped fidgeting. She spoke about her classes, the cost of textbooks, the sleepless nights working shifts just to afford tuition. Henry listened, really listened, which surprised him. He found himself smiling at her little stories, intrigued by her determination. There was a warmth in her that he hadn't expected to feel in this cold world he lived in, and slowly they made love passionately like they've known each other for long. When the clock neared midnight, Henry stood, running a hand through his hair. "Let me drive you home." Rachel blinked, startled. "Home?" "Yes," he smiled faintly. "You don't belong here, Rachel, not in rooms like this." Her lips parted as though she wanted to respond, but she excused herself to the bathroom instead. Her reflection in the mirror stared back at her, pale and frightened. She touched her stomach, whispered a prayer she didn't fully understand, then pulled out her small phone. She dialed Clara. Her voice was hushed but firm. "I'll get the money, Clara, whatever it takes. I'll find a way." Outside, Henry had moved near the bathroom door, waiting. The words drifted through the thin walls and struck him like a blade. "Whatever it takes." So that was it. The shy act, the trembling hands, it was all performance. She was just another girl, playing innocent to dig deeper into his pockets. His chest hardened with disappointment. By the time she stepped back out, Henry had already placed an envelope on the dresser. "Here, for your troubles." Rachel froze, staring at the envelope as though it were poison. "Henry, I didn't." "Take it," he said sharply, his eyes cold now, "and don't call me again." Her throat tightened. She wanted to explain, to tell him what she had really meant, but the words refused to form. By the time she found her voice, he was already walking out. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving her alone in the silence, clutching the envelope with tears burning in her eyes. The tiny bathroom smelled of disinfectant and damp soap. Rachel sat on the floor, her knees tucked under her chin, staring at the little stick clutched in her trembling hand. The 2 red lines glared at her like wounds. Her breath came in shallow gasps. She pressed her fist against her mouth to stop the sound that wanted to tear out of her throat. No, God, please. She had been late for weeks, but she told herself it was stress, exhaustion, hunger, anything but this. Now the truth lay in her palm, undeniable. The door creaked open, and Clara stepped in without knocking. She stopped short when she saw Rachel on the floor, her eyes darting to the test strip. "Are you serious?" Clara whispered, her gum losing its flavor in her mouth. Rachel's tears spilled over. She couldn't even speak. Clara bent down, picked up the stick, and scoffed. "You're pregnant? Oh, Rachel." Rachel shook her head violently, as if denial could change it. "I can't be. I can't." "Well, you are." Clara leaned against the sink, crossing her arms. "You know what this means, right? You have to tell him." Rachel's eyes flashed. "No." "Yes," Clara insisted. "Henry's rich. Do you know how many girls would kill to be in your shoes right now? He'll take care of you. He'll take care of the baby. You don't have to struggle anymore." Rachel's voice rose, breaking in the middle. "You don't understand. He already thinks I'm a liar, Clara. He thinks I used him for money. If I go back now, he'll never believe this isn't just another trick. I won't crawl to him." Clara rolled her eyes. "You're stubborn, you know that? Too stubborn for your own good. You'd rather die of hunger than accept help. Do you want your child to suffer too?" The word child cut through Rachel like a knife. She pressed her hands to her stomach, shaking. A child, a tiny life growing inside her. Her tears blurred everything. "I'll find a way. I'll take care of us. Alone if I have to." Clara sighed, tossing the test strip onto the counter. "Suit yourself, but don't say I didn't warn you." She walked out, leaving Rachel on the bathroom floor, her body trembling as if the weight of the world had fallen on her shoulders. By dawn, Rachel had packed her few belongings, clothes, textbooks, and a photo of her late father. She left no note, no explanation. She slipped out of the city like a shadow, carrying with her the secret of her unborn child and a determination forged in fire. The bus rumbled through the night, carrying her farther from Henry, farther from the place where her life had collapsed. She pressed her palm against her stomach, whispering through her tears. "You're all I have now, and I promise I won't fail you." The air inside the small clinic was heavy with the scent of disinfectant and old wood. Rachel lay on a worn delivery bed, sweat streaming down her face, her fingers gripping the sheets until her knuckles turned white. The sound of her own ragged breathing filled the room, broken by the sharp commands of the midwife. "Push, girl, again push." Rachel screamed as another wave of pain split through her body, hotter than fire, deeper than anything she had ever known. She wanted to give up, to let the darkness swallow her, but the midwife's stern voice dragged her back. "You don't want your child to die, do you? Push." Rachel summoned every shred of strength left in her and bore down, her entire being trembling. A sudden cry pierced the air, a shrill, beautiful sound that cut through her pain like light through clouds. The midwife lifted the tiny bundle, slick and fragile, and announced with a tired smile, "A boy." Rachel's tears flooded her cheeks. She reached out trembling arms, and the baby was laid against her chest. He was so small, his skin soft as silk, his fist curling instinctively around her finger. His cry softened as he nestled against her, his warmth filling the cold emptiness inside her. Her voice broke as she whispered, "Daniel, your name is Daniel." The midwife bustled about, cleaning and wrapping the baby, but Rachel barely noticed. She was lost in the wonder of the tiny life she had brought into the world. Alone, yes, but not unloved. For the first time in years, she felt needed. The weeks that followed blurred together in exhaustion and sacrifice. Rachel worked odd jobs, washing clothes, selling vegetables at the roadside, scrubbing the floors of strangers' houses, anything to earn enough for food and rent. Her days started before dawn. She would strap Daniel to her back and walk miles to the market, returning only when the sun had burned the sky to orange. At night, She would study by candlelight, her textbooks spread open while Daniel slept beside her on the mat. Her eyes ached, her body throbbed with weariness, but she refused to stop. Neighbors sometimes whispered, "A young girl with no husband, a child born out of wedlock." Rachel heard them, but she raised her head high, pretending the words did not cut her. Daniel was her pride, her anchor. There were nights when she would hold him close, his tiny chest rising and falling against hers, and whisper through her tears, "It's just us, Daniel, just us against the world, but we'll make it. I promise." And slowly she did. Years passed, marked by birthdays celebrated with bread and laughter, by long walks to class with Daniel's hand clutching hers. Rachel clawed her way through nursing school, every exam a mountain, every tuition payment a miracle earned through sweat and pain. Finally, the day came when she stood in a crowded hall, her heart hammering in her chest as her name was called. She walked across the stage, dressed in her simple gown, and received her degree. The applause thundered in her ears. She thought of all the nights she had cried in silence, all the days she had worked until her body screamed, all the moments she thought she would break. Yet here she was, whole, unbroken, victorious. Daniel, now a little boy with bright eyes, waved from the crowd, clapping with all his might. Rachel's smile trembled as she lifted the certificate in her hands. "We did it, Daniel," she whispered. "We made it." The morning sun spread a golden light across the city as Rachel adjusted her crisp new uniform. The white fabric felt strange against her skin, a badge of victory she had fought so long to earn. Her reflection in the mirror looked almost like someone else, a woman who had endured storms and still stood tall. Daniel, now 5, sat at the edge of the bed, swinging his legs. His eyes glowed with pride as he stared at his mother. "Mummy, you look like a real nurse." Rachel smiled, bending down to straighten his shirt. "That's because I am one, sweetheart. Today is my first day at Brendan Hospital." "Is it big?" Daniel asked. Rachel kissed his forehead. "It's the biggest in the city." She paused, swallowing the lump in her throat. "And it's the beginning of our new life." The lobby of Brendan Hospital buzzed with activity, nurses rushing with charts, doctors striding with purpose, patients waiting in lines of weary silence. Rachel clutched her file tightly, her heart racing with both fear and excitement. At the orientation desk, a supervisor scanned her papers and nodded. "Rachel Morgan, you're assigned to the surgical unit. Report to Dr. Henry Brandon, chief surgeon and CEO." The name hit her like a physical blow. Her grip on the file faltered. "I'm sorry, who?" The supervisor barely looked up. "Dr. Henry Brandon, your immediate superior, top surgeon in this hospital. He doesn't tolerate mistakes, so keep your head straight." Rachel's chest constricted. Of all the hospitals in the city, of all the wards in the world, it had to be him. She wanted to run, to disappear, but her feet betrayed her, carrying her toward the very door she feared. Inside the surgical office, Henry stood tall, his lab coat neat over his tailored suit. His presence filled the room, a man of command, sharp eyes that saw too much, a voice that cut through noise like a scalpel. He was reviewing a chart when the knock came. "Enter." Rachel stepped in, her breath caught in her throat. Henry looked up, his eyes landing on her face. For a moment, time froze. The file in his hand slipped slightly, though he caught it before it fell. His voice, usually steady, cracked at the edges. "You." Rachel forced herself to speak, her voice a whisper. "Dr. Brandon." The silence stretched. His gaze lingered on her features, the same eyes that haunted him years ago, the same lips that had trembled when she spoke. Anger flared inside him, but so did something else, something he hated to admit, desire. "You're assigned to me," Henry asked at last, his jaw tightening. "Yes," Rachel answered quietly. He set the file down with a sharp snap. "Fine, we'll keep this professional. I don't mix my work with personal mistakes." The word mistakes cut her like glass, but she held her chin high. "I'm here to work, sir." Henry studied her for a long, silent moment. She was more beautiful than he remembered, but there was a strength in her now, a fire he had not seen before. Yet he could not forget that night, the phone call, the words that convinced him she was only after money. "Good," he said curtly. "Report at 7 tomorrow, don't be late." Rachel turned to leave, her heart hammering, but as she closed the door behind her, Henry's eyes followed her. Inside, he was torn apart. Why her? Why now? That evening, Henry sat in his office, staring at the skyline outside his window. Michelle's laughter echoed faintly in his mind, his fiancée, the woman he thought he should marry. Yet Rachel's face, her voice, her very presence had unsettled him in ways he couldn't control. And somewhere deep down, in the part of him he tried to silence, one question rose again and again. What if I was wrong about her? The restaurant was dimly lit, a haven for the wealthy who desired privacy. Crystal glasses glimmered beneath golden chandeliers, soft music drifting across the air like silk. Michelle leaned forward across the table, her red lips curving into a smile that was both alluring and dangerous. Across from her sat Serb, Henry's closest friend, his confidant since medical school. Yet tonight, the loyalty that bound them seemed nothing but a fragile illusion. Michelle's manicured hand rested lightly on Serb's wrist. "Henry is predictable," she said, her voice like honey. "He's blinded by duty, by his obsession with work. He doesn't see people the way you and I do." Serb swirled his wine, his eyes fixed on her. "You mean he doesn't see you?" Michelle laughed softly, a sound that turned heads from nearby tables. "He sees me as his future wife, but that's all. He thinks marriage is a transaction, his brilliance, his name, his money, and in return I play the perfect partner." "And yet," Serb leaned closer, his voice dropping, "you're here with me." Her smile sharpened. "Because you give me something Henry never can." Their glasses clinked together. For a moment, silence fell, broken only by the quiet thrum of music. Then Michelle spoke again, her tone colder. "When I marry Henry, his fortune becomes ours. But I'll need your help, Serb. A prenup is already in discussion and Henry trusts you. If you guide him, he'll sign something that favors me." Serb arched a brow. "You're planning to strip him clean." "Not planning," Michelle corrected, her voice like steel hidden in velvet. "Assuring." She reached for his hand again, this time lacing her fingers with his. "And when the time is right, we'll have everything we want." Meanwhile, Henry sat alone in his study, papers spread across his desk, yet his mind wandered far from the hospital's financial reports. Rachel's face kept intruding on his thoughts, the nervous strength in her eyes, the soft curve of her smile when she spoke to patients. He ran his hands over his face and let out a sharp sigh. Why her? After all this time, why is she back in my life? The sound of heels clicking across marble broke his thoughts. Michelle entered, her perfume heavy, her beauty undeniable. She perched on the arm of his chair, sliding her arms around his shoulders. "You're working late again," she murmured. Henry offered a thin smile. "There's always work." Michelle tilted his chin toward her, her eyes shimmering with practiced tenderness. "You need to rest sometimes. You need me." Her lips brushed his, but Henry felt the hollowness of it. There was no fire, no spark, not the kind that haunted him whenever Rachel walked into a room. Michelle sensed the distance, but disguised her frustration with a playful laugh. "Don't overwork yourself, Henry. Remember, we have a future to plan." As she left, her phone buzzed in her purse. She slipped it out discreetly, glancing at the message. It was from Serb. "Tomorrow, same place." Her lips curved as she typed back beneath the folds of her gown. Henry didn't notice, or maybe he didn't want to. But the walls around him were beginning to crack. The surgical ward hummed with quiet urgency. Nurses moved briskly, the smell of antiseptic clinging to the air, while the steady beeping of monitors filled the silence between footsteps. Rachel stood by the prep table, her gloved hands trembling slightly as she arranged the instruments. She could feel Henry's presence before she heard his voice. He entered the room with the calm authority of a man used to command, his white coat flowing behind him like a cloak. "Scalpel," he said during the operation, his tone clipped. Rachel passed it with precision, her eyes never meeting his. For hours she worked by his side, handing, anticipating, responding. And each time her fingers brushed his through the latex, her heart stumbled. Henry never flinched, but she noticed how his jaw tightened, how his eyes flicked to her face when he thought no one would notice. When the surgery ended, he stripped off his gloves and left the room without a word. Rachel exhaled shakily, relief and sorrow battling inside her. Later that evening, Rachel sat at a small table in the cafeteria, nursing a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. She felt his shadow fall across her before he spoke. "May I sit?" She looked up, Henry, his expression unreadable but his eyes heavy with something she couldn't place. She nodded. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Henry broke the silence. "You've changed," he said. Rachel's lips curved in a faint, bitter smile. "Life does that." His gaze lingered on her. "I used to think I knew who you were. That night, I thought I saw through you." Rachel's chest tightened, but she forced her voice steady. "And what did you see?" "A girl who was desperate to play the innocent while plotting how to drain me of money." His tone was sharp, but softer underneath, as though even he wasn't certain anymore. Rachel swallowed hard. She wanted to tell him everything, the truth about Daniel, about her struggles, about the vow she had made in the dark hours of her life. But fear choked her. Fear that he would dismiss her again. Fear that he would turn her confession into another weapon against her. So instead, she whispered, "Believe what you want. I don't owe you explanations." Henry leaned back, his hands clenched on the table. "You're right, you don't." His eyes softened almost imperceptibly. "But I can't stop wondering if I was wrong." Her heart stuttered. For a fleeting moment, the wall between them cracked. Then Michelle's voice rang out from across the cafeteria. "Henry." Both turned to see her approaching, her designer heels clicking, her smile polished. She draped herself over Henry with practiced intimacy, her eyes flicking to Rachel with thinly veiled disdain. "Darling, I've been looking for you everywhere," Michelle said sweetly, though her gaze lingered on Rachel like a warning. Rachel rose, clutching her file. "I should go." As she walked away, Henry's eyes followed her until she disappeared from sight. His chest tightened with a strange ache, anger, regret, desire, all tangled into one. Michelle slipped her hand into his. "Forget her. She's just another nurse. You have me." But Henry knew she was wrong. Rachel wasn't just another nurse. She was the ghost of a past he couldn't bury, the storm he couldn't ignore. The night was cool, the city glittering beneath a blanket of stars. Henry parked his car in front of Michelle's penthouse, exhaustion pulling at his bones after a 14-hour shift. He hadn't intended to come, but Michelle had insisted, her messages growing more insistent with each passing hour. He climbed the stairs quietly, keycard in hand. As he reached the landing, a sound stopped him. Laughter, low, intimate, not hers alone. Henry frowned. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The living room was dim, a wine bottle open on the table, 2 glasses half filled. Michelle's scarf lay carelessly across the sofa, and from the balcony came the sound of hushed voices. Henry's chest tightened. He moved toward the glass doors, but just before he reached them, Michelle emerged, her smile bright and feigned. "Henry," she exclaimed, "you didn't tell me you were coming early." Henry's eyes flicked to the balcony. For a moment, he was sure he saw a shadow slipping away, but the night swallowed it before he could be certain. "Who was that?" he asked flatly. Michelle's laugh was too quick, too sharp. "No one, just a neighbor dropping by to borrow a corkscrew. You're imagining things." Henry said nothing, his eyes narrowing slightly. He had known Michelle long enough to recognize her masks, and yet he forced himself to nod. "Right, a neighbor." The next day at the hospital, Henry found Serb in his office, lounging comfortably in his chair as though he owned the place. "Rough night?" Serb asked, smirking. Henry studied him, his mind replaying the shadow on the balcony, the laughter, the unfinished glass of wine. For the first time, doubt crept into his trust for the man who had stood beside him through years of struggle. Serb raised an eyebrow. "You're looking at me like I stole your stethoscope." Henry forced a laugh, though it sounded hollow in his own ears. "Just tired." But when Serb left, Henry sat in silence, staring at the closed door. Something was wrong. The friend he trusted, the woman he planned to marry, suddenly their worlds seemed woven with threads of secrecy. Meanwhile, Rachel sat in the pediatric ward during her break, watching Daniel through the glass as he colored in a book the nurses had given him. His laughter, bright and pure, filled her heart. One of the senior nurses sat beside her. "Your boy got your eyes," she said warmly. Rachel's smile faltered. "So everyone keeps saying. His father must be proud." The words pierced her like a blade. Rachel turned her face away, hiding the sting of tears. "He doesn't know," she whispered. The nurse glanced at her but said nothing more. Rachel pressed her palms together, her heart aching. Every day she worked alongside Henry, every day she saw him unaware of the child who carried his blood. It was a torment she could barely endure. That evening, Henry returned home to find Michelle already there, her arms around him, her perfume strong enough to choke. But when she whispered, "I love you, Henry," he heard the faint echo of a different voice, a softer truth that belonged to Rachel. And for the first time, he wondered if the life he had built with Michelle was nothing more than a veil, one already starting to crack. The hospital gala glittered with chandeliers and expensive gowns. The city's elite filled the grand hall, raising glasses to toast Brendan Hospital's continued success. Henry, as CEO, stood at the center of it all, his polished smile concealing the unrest inside him. Michelle clung to his arm like a jewel on display, dazzling in her emerald dress. To the crowd, they were perfect. But Henry's eyes kept drifting, unwillingly, uncontrollably, toward Rachel, who stood across the room in her nurse's uniform, assisting with medical displays. Her presence unsettled him more than the stares of donors, more than the speeches he was expected to give. She looked radiant, not from wealth or jewels, but from a quiet strength that outshone the glamour around her. As the night wore on, Henry excused himself from Michelle's side. He slipped through the back corridors toward his office, needing air, needing distance. That was when he heard it, the muffled sound of voices behind a half-closed door. Curiosity or something darker pulled him closer. He recognized them instantly. Michelle's sultry tone, Serb's deep chuckle. Henry froze, every muscle taut. "He still doesn't suspect a thing," Michelle whispered, her laughter sharp. "Honestly, Henry is so blinded by his pride, he'd never imagine us." Serb's voice followed, low and mocking. "And when you marry him, we'll have access to everything. The prenup's already being shaped. I'll make sure he signs it without question." Michelle giggled, the sound laced with venom. "And when the ink is dry, I'll have his fortune. You and I, Serb, will finally get what we deserve." Henry's world tilted, his breath caught in his throat. The people he trusted most, his fiancée, his best friend, were carving knives into his back. He stumbled away before they could notice him, rage burning through his veins, sorrow cracking through his chest. That night, Henry sat in his darkened study, a glass of whiskey untouched on the table. His mind replayed their words over and over, each syllable another wound. When Rachel's soft knock came at the door, he started. She peeked in, hesitating. "Sir, are you all right? The staff said you left the gala suddenly." Henry looked up at her, his eyes raw, stripped of the mask he wore before the world. For the first time in years, she saw not the powerful surgeon or the wealthy CEO, but a broken man. "They betrayed me," he said hoarsely. Rachel stepped inside, shutting the door behind her. "Who?" "Michelle, Serb." His hand tightened around the glass until it almost shattered. "The two people I thought I could trust above all others. I heard them tonight. I heard everything." Rachel's breath caught. She wanted to comfort him, to tell him he wasn't alone, but her own secret pressed against her chest like a blade. Henry's eyes found hers, burning with both pain and something unspoken. "Tell me one thing, Rachel. At least tell me you're not like them. Tell me I wasn't wrong about you all those years ago." Her lips parted, trembling, but no words came. Because the truth she held inside, about Daniel, about the night that bound them, was ready to burst free. And once spoken, nothing would ever be the same. The storm outside lashed against the hospital windows, thunder rolling through the night. Inside, the air was no less turbulent. Henry stood in his office, his fists braced against the desk, staring at the rain streaking down the glass. The betrayal of Michelle and Serb still cut through him like open wounds. But it was Rachel's silence that haunted him most. He saw it in her eyes whenever he asked about her life, the way her lips pressed tight as if holding back a secret too heavy to carry. The revelation came suddenly, without warning. Daniel had been admitted to the pediatric ward with a high fever. Rachel was frantic, hovering beside his bed, clutching his hand while the doctors ran tests. Henry, hearing of the emergency, rushed in, his heart pounding though he barely understood why. When he entered the room and saw the boy, dark hair tousled, eyes fever-bright, he froze. The child's features struck him with a force that left him breathless. His eyes, those eyes. Daniel looked up weakly, murmuring, "Mummy," before drifting back to sleep. Henry turned to Rachel, his voice sharp, almost breaking. "Whose child is this?" Rachel's lips trembled. "Henry." "Answer me," his voice cracked, raw with desperation. "Whose son is he?" Tears filled her eyes. She clutched Daniel closer as if shielding him. "He's yours." The words shattered the air between them. Henry staggered back as if struck. "Mine," his voice was a whisper, then a roar. "All these years, Rachel, you kept my child from me." Rachel's sobs spilled over. "I wanted to tell you, that night, you wouldn't listen. You thought I was lying, that I wanted your money. How could I go back after that? You would never have believed me." Henry's hands raked through his hair, his heart pounding with fury and grief. He looked at Daniel again, his son, his flesh, his blood. The boy's chest rose and fell in fragile rhythm, and Henry's anger melted into something deeper, something fierce and protective. "My son," he whispered hoarsely, his hand hovering over Daniel's small arm. "All this time I had a son." Rachel's tears streamed unchecked. "I did what I could, Henry. I gave him everything I had. I fought for him, but I couldn't fight you too." Henry sank into the chair beside the bed, his head in his hands. His world had collapsed twice in one night, first the betrayal of Michelle and Serb, now the revelation of a child he never knew existed. Yet amid the ruin, a strange clarity bloomed. This boy was his, and no one, no betrayal, no lie, no distance, would take him away again. The confrontation with Michelle came swiftly after. Henry cornered her and Serb in his office days later, evidence in hand, recordings of their whispered schemes, bank transfers traced, meetings uncovered. Michelle's mask cracked into fury. "You think you can throw me aside after everything? I'll ruin you, Henry." But Henry only laughed bitterly. "You already tried, and you failed, because I have something you'll never understand, something worth more than all the money you wanted." He turned away from her, toward the ward where Rachel and Daniel waited. In the quiet of the hospital garden later that evening, Rachel sat with Daniel sleeping against her shoulder. Henry approached slowly, uncertain, humbled in a way he had never known. "Rachel," he said softly. She looked up, her eyes wary but gentle. "I can't change the past," Henry admitted. "I judged you, I failed you, and because of that I lost years with my son." His voice broke. "But if you'll let me, I don't want to lose another day." Rachel's breath caught. She searched his face, torn between hurt and hope. "Henry, I don't know if I can trust you." "I'll earn it," he vowed. "Not with words, with everything I do from this moment." He brushed a hand across Daniel's hair. "For him, for you, for us." For the first time in years, Rachel let her heart crack open. She saw not the man who had wounded her, but the father who had found his child, the man who might yet redeem himself. And beneath the storm clouds, as the city lights glowed, the three of them sat together. A broken family, perhaps, but one with the chance to be whole. The truth had torn them apart, but blood and love would bind them again.